Hi everyone, my name is Leanne, and as we are in the midst of the Irish Readathon, I am going to be doing the Irish Bookworm Tag. This was created by Aoife, and I will leave her channel links down below in the description so you can check it out. It's a pretty self-explanatory tag. It is a tag all about being a bookworm who is also Irish. If you don't know what the Irish Readathon is, I will leave my various videos about this readathon linked down below in the description and in the cards for you to check out. But without further ado, let's get into the questions. So the first question is to simply introduce yourself and tell you where I'm from. So I'm from North Dublin. I have lived here the entirety of my childhood, but then when I was 18 I moved to Wales for 4 years, and then I moved to England for 2 years, and I have been living in North Dublin again since this time last year because I came back because of COVID, and I've definitely been living back home for much longer than I expected. I definitely don't have the accent that most people from where I'm from have. I think over the years of me not living here, it's kind of faded. I think I definitely do have an Irish accent, but my accent gets mistaken for lots of things all of the time. I think when people imagine an Irish accent, they don't really think of a Dublin accent, and also because my accent is quite diluted because I hadn't lived here for a while. But I used to get mistaken for American all of the time. I've been mistaken for Scottish a lot. I've had really odd ones, like people have thought I'm Australian before, people have thought I was South African, people have thought I was Canadian. So quite often when I do meet new people, they will ask me like, oh, where's your accent from? And I will try and make them guess. The second question is, what Irish book do you associate with your childhood? For me, this is definitely Roddy Doyle's children's books. The Giggler Treatment was one that I absolutely loved, and this is a book that is about a dog named Rover. He's an Irish wolfhound, and he can talk to these creatures called gigglers, and I don't even really remember what gigglers are or how to describe them. They're kind of like fairies or pixies, but they're kind of mischievous and a bit of a nuisance. At least that's what I remember anyway. And it's just about this Irish family. I remember that the dad works in like a cream cracker factory, right? They are really, really funny, and I do remember that there are like jokes in there for the grown-ups as well as the kids. But Roddy Doyle is such an amazing Irish writer, both in terms of his children's books and his books for grown-ups. He really captures such a kind of quintessential Dublin humour. The next question is, what books did you study for the Leaving Certificate? So the Leaving Certificate is our kind of like final state exams that you take when you're 18, and English is a mandatory subject, so everyone does an English exam, and then you can do like different levels of difficulty. For my like big main text, I studied Macbeth, and I really enjoyed studying that. There was so much to kind of sink your teeth into and properly get into analysing. We also saw a really fantastic stage production of it as well that I really enjoyed, and the three witches were like, they were kind of like ninjas, and that was a really cool way of interpreting those characters. We also did the Comparative Study, and for this I studied How Many Miles to Babylon by Jennifer Johnson, which is about two young Irish boys who are from very different backgrounds. One of them is from a kind of very wealthy Anglo-Irish background, and one of them is from a very kind of working class Republican kind of family, and they are both drafted into the First World War, and it's about how their friendship shifts and develops under those circumstances and the privileges that someone with an Anglo-Irish upbringing would have. We also studied Sive, which is a play about a young girl in quite a traditional Irish family, and it's about how her family want to set her up with someone who is much older that she has no interest in, and the secret relationship that she has with someone who we would now recognize as a much more suitable match for her. And we also studied a film called I'm Not Scared, and for the life of me I could not tell you what that film was about now. Poetry was also a big part of the Leaving Cert curriculum, so I studied Seamus Heaney, of course. I did a full video a couple of years ago talking about my relationship with Seamus Heaney's poetry, and I do quite a deep dive into some of his poems, so I'll leave that linked down below and in the cards as well if that is something that interests you. We also studied Sylvia Plath, Elizabeth Bishop, Philip Larkin, and also Emily Dickinson, and Emily Dickinson was definitely the poet at the time that I found the kind of easiest to get to grips with, and I enjoyed analysing the most. And I'm still a huge fan of her poetry, but when I went off to university and I studied Sylvia Plath in more depth, I really found a new appreciation for her work. I think at the time when I was reading it during the Leaving Cert, it was tapping into like quite a lot of emotions for me, and I wasn't able to quite be objective and analyse it. And then I also studied Seamus Heaney again at university, which I talk about more in that video I mentioned, but it was really great to dive into his poems a lot more. I really enjoyed Leaving Cert English. I think I definitely felt a lot of pressure, and I put a huge amount of pressure on myself at the time, but it was because it was something I really wanted to do well at. You know, I wanted to go study English. And during the years where I was studying the Leaving Cert curriculum, it really showed to me that I was capable of doing that. I was able to do this kind of analysis of these texts and spot these themes, spot these motifs, and be able to make connections between texts. And it definitely instilled a lot of confidence in me that I was able to do these things, and these things did come quite naturally to me. The next question is, are there any books that are set in the county that you're from? I am from Dublin, so it is the capital city. A lot of books are set here. But the one I'm going to mention in particular is The Gathering by Anne Enright, which is a book that has a lot to do with Irish trauma and how a lot of that trauma has been repressed, that historical damage, but also contemporary damage like economic collapse following the period that was known as the Celtic Tiger, and how that really negatively impacted those from disadvantaged backgrounds. But the reason this one stands out as one that I can recognize as being where I'm from is because the main character drives to the airport a lot, and she's describing going along roads that I know, and I live really close to the airport. Like, sometimes I can see planes like ascending but relatively kind of close to the ground. I live very close to the airport. So I just remember when I was reading that book, I was like, oh, I really recognize this. The next question is, who is your favorite Irish author? I mean, do we really need to let me tell you about this author. I don't know if I've mentioned her very much. Her name's Louise O'Neill. I have read all of Louise O'Neill's books. I will read every book that she ever writes, and I will read it immediately. I would count Only Ever Yours as amongst one of the books that really got me back into reading. Asking for It was a book that I studied over and over again. When I got to my final year of university, a lot of the things I was talking about was kind of the treatment of young Irish women in the media, but also locally, about scandal around young Irish women. So I read Asking for It over and over again. I am obsessed with The Little Mermaid, So the Surface Breaks. I adored it. Almost Love made me kind of very uncomfortable with how seen it made me feel. And in After the Silence, her first kind of venture into the thriller genre, I saw elements of things that she was discussing in her previous books all intermingled into this really page-turning story, which on the surface seemed like a thriller mystery, but was really about the tragedy of being a victim of the patriarchy and being a victim of domestic abuse. Love her. I've done a full video where I do a bit of a deep dive into why I love her books so much. Huge Louise O'Neill fan, cannot recommend her books enough. The next question is, do you have any books written in Irish? I have one book that is written in Irish, and I'm not going to show it on the channel purely because it is an author and a series that is very beloved from my childhood, but I no longer feel any desire to promote online. I'm sure you can guess which book that is. I would really like to read something in Irish one day. My Irish isn't great. I really loved Irish in primary school, but as soon as I got to secondary school, it just wasn't taught very well at all, which I think is partially the fault of like the education system. Like, that is a huge part of the blame of why Irish isn't taught properly if you don't go to like a Gael school where it's spoken all the time. But I also just had a genuinely shit teacher. So the combination of those two things didn't create a very productive learning environment for me. I can have a bit of a conversation in Irish, but I would be quite slow. So maybe actually reading something would be a better way for me to flex those language muscles again. The next question is, what is your favourite Irish bookshop? And gosh, there are too many to name. Eason's, of course, has a very firm place in my heart, but I love Hodges Figgis, I love Debray, I love the Gutter Bookshop. There's a really fantastic Oxfam bookshop in Dublin as well if you're interested in getting second-hand books, and also Chapters has a really incredible second-hand section too. One of the things I love about Dublin is kind of the size of the city centre and how you could very easily go on a bookshop crawl to all of these different places. I've definitely done it before where I've gone around all of these different bookshops and bought like one or two books from each of them, because we love to shop local, we love to support our local indie. And finally, I have been requested to tag some people. Now, I'm going to leave some people listed down below in the description, and I would love for you guys to do this tag. The Irish book community is not huge when you compare it to the communities in other countries. So if you are an Irish booktuber and I haven't connected with you before, please do say hi down in the comments. I would love for us to have a chat and get to know each other. But anyways, that's all I'm going to talk about today. If you don't have anything in particular to say about this tag, leave me your favorite green emoji so that I know that you're here. Thank you so much to Aoife for tagging me in this. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day, and I will speak to you soon.